Hello, my name is Kathy James, and I am the founder of Girl Fight LLC and the GFYA program. Today, I have the pleasure of introducing Ann Kent, a registered dietitian. Ann believes a healthy family starts at the table. She makes gathering for dinner possible for busy schedules, including those in college and the young adult, and has agreed to come and share some of her helpful meal planning tips with all of us today. Welcome, Ann.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you for joining me and agreeing to share your expertise with the community.
Definitely. It's a hot topic, nutrition, and, how to get it done and how to get it done right.
Absolutely. I think I'm going to learn quite a bit today, honestly. I brought you on for the young adult community, but I'm really looking forward to learning some tips for myself. So I'm excited about this. So to get us kicked off, why don't we talk about why should a college student or a young adult even bother with meal planning?
I think it's an excellent question. And I remember as a college student myself, it's not really like top of mind a lot of times, especially if you're living in the dorms and you have a meal plan. Maybe this might not seem very relevant if someone else is providing your food, or, I think a lot of times food as a college student, especially, is just the last thing on your list. And it's just kind of a hassle and you just have to get it done. And so a lot of times it's easier to, go through the drive-through or grab something quick or survive on peanut butter and jelly. But I want to suggest that developing some of these habits when you're in such a transitory time in your life can be really helpful for setting you up for success for really lifelong habits. And not that everything is, obviously this is very transitional and lots of things are fluid, but some of the habits that you create during this time in your life really do stick with you for a long time. But also in the more present sense, I think meal planning, even in small ways, can be really helpful for keeping you on track with just making sure you're nourishing your body well. Not all of the foods at fast food, obviously, or even in the meal plans are necessarily very nutritious. And so learning to get in some other nutrition, maybe in times when you're not necessarily going to the drive-through or to the cafeteria, snacks or breakfast or any of those in between times, that can be a really great opportunity to nourish your body and feel your best. So whether that means for you academically, or if you're an athlete, or if you are just, wanting to live a long, healthy life.
Right.
So yeah, that's kind of the, even though meal planning seems like a very adult thing to do, I think this is actually a really ideal time to start even just considering it.
Absolutely. And I mean, they're adulting now,
Right.
So perfect time. I know I did not meal plan at all, and as a young adult, and I suffered for it drastically. So I think that this is an important topic. I think that there's, easy ways to go about it. And I'm really excited to hear, some of the tips that you can offer. So very good.
Yeah.
So what are some of the benefits of eating meals together? You talked about that on your website a little bit. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Definitely. Yeah, I think that's really important to start with the why. Why do we even care about this? And I mean, I mentioned nutrition and eating at home or cooking meals on your own typically is going to be more nutritious than going out to eat. And so, of course, that's what we always think of as the reason why you should eat at home. But actually, I would argue that the benefits of eating together at the table go far beyond that. I grew up on a farm, and I have some of my most cherished memories of eating meals together. We would, finish our meal, and then we would sit at the table sometimes for an hour or even more, just talking and sharing life. And so as I've, become an adult and have my own family now, that's something that's really important to me, to have that community aspect, that family aspect of sharing meals together. And so even though, you might not, obviously, most of your population do not have kids of their own, that community around food is still really, really important. And it's something that, I think is really important to, like I said, develop now, so that when you do have your family, it's not all of a sudden like a shock of, oh my gosh, how do I do this? Because that's where a lot of the clients that I work with when I do one-on-one consultations, a lot of them are struggling to figure out like how to break sort of, maybe they weren't taught how to meal plan, or they never learned how to cook. And all of a sudden they find themselves like with a really busy schedule, working, having a family, going to soccer practice and all these things. And like dinner has become an afterthought for them as well. And when it's an afterthought, they also find themselves in, that same sort of like rush of we're always eating in the car, or we're always grabbing something fast. And you're not only missing out on the nutrition, but you miss out on conversations. Yeah. So that's a really big thing. Some of the more practical reasons, though, in addition to that philosophical reason of, community, basically like cost is a really big deal. And I'm sure a lot of your adolescents are, like, wow, oh my gosh, adulting is really expensive. Like having an apartment is really expensive. And you can't afford to waste food. So cooking from scratch is still less expensive than going out to eat. I know it can often seem like McDonald's is a cheaper option. It's definitely not cheaper in the long run when you account in the health costs from eating that type of food chronically, but also learning to meal plan and not waste food by throwing it in the garbage is so important. So that's one of the main reasons why I would argue in the here and now, like you've got a meal plan in order to manage your inventory. And also, I'm sure your audience can really connect with this, that, kind of as a side note, we need to also be thinking about the health of our planet, not just the health of our bodies, but also like, how are we taking care of our planet and climate change and these sorts of things. And some of the most impactful changes you can make as an individual are related to food. The number one thing you can do is to eat less animal products and to shift towards a plant-based diet. But one of the second things is to reduce your food waste, because the stats are crazy. I think the numbers are like almost a third of the food in the United States is thrown away at the consumer level. And so it's a really big deal if you can develop some of these habits to protect your health, reduce your food costs, and also, as a huge benefit, protect our planet.
Absolutely. Leftovers, when you cook a really good meal, leftovers are typically better the next day because the seasons have had time to soak in. And so obviously there's a shelf life, right, to everything. You don't want to put it in the fridge and then find that it's molding. That's not good. But if you meal plan and you plan ahead, you can have, if you're planning for a single person, you can have 2 or 3 meals out of that one meal.
Yes, that's such a great point. And actually, that's one of my key tips in meal planning is to not cook every day. I think a lot of times when we hear the word meal plan, it's like, oh my gosh, now I have to figure out breakfast and lunch and dinner, and I have to do that 7 days a week. So, oh my gosh, that's 21 meals, and I have to cook multiple times. Actually, that's not true. Most of the time, even for me with a family, I can cook 3 or 4 times a week and have plenty. So if you're a single person, you can cook much less than that. If you live with roommates and they are at all on board with this, then something that I actually used to do in college was we each assigned a different person a day of the week, and we would share some of those cooking duties so we wouldn't get so burned out with having to do all the cooking. But it also gave us an opportunity to learn how to cook. And that was a really big deal. If you didn't grow up with a mom who cooked, taking some small steps to practice was super helpful.
Absolutely. So what are some life transitions that might equal lifelong habits?
Definitely. That's a great question. So yeah, I mentioned you're in a season of transition, so this is setting you up, but what does that mean? Really the key part is that most people are for the first time in their lives are living by themselves or living in a situation in which you are now in charge of feeding yourself. And so you are sort of thrust into the question of how do I meal plan? And herein lies another sort of myth that I think we get caught up in when we think about meal planning, is that I either write down and do a meal plan, or I don't meal plan. But that's false. That's a false binary. Actually, everybody meal plans, whether you think you are or not. The question is, are you doing that intentionally, or are you doing it randomly throughout the week on the fly? And because you are constantly thinking about what you're going to have to eat for your next meal. It's just a question of, have you thought about it in advance, or are you spending a lot of time during the week? And so if you are able to develop this skill now, when you are in this new transition, then you are going to be able to take that, and it'll change over the course of your life, of course, depending on who you're living with and what that looks like. But you'll be able to take those skills and then apply that to whatever situation you have in the future. So it's almost, I think you've had other guests, talk about finance and things like that. And it's really, this is like another investment in your future, that a little bit of effort right now, you are going to be amazed at the results that you can reap 5 years, 10 years down the road. Yes,
absolutely. Whenever the family goes out to dinner, my jaw drops, and the sticker shock, if you will.
No kidding. Like talking about like going out for one is expensive, but going out for a family of 4 or 5 is like, oh my.
And then you immediately regret it. And then not only that, you might go re-eaten, and it wasn't the healthiest. So
and all of a sudden you're like, oh, I don't feel good. This isn't good for my wallet. Like, there's a lot of negative consequences if we haven't set ourselves up.
Absolutely.
And I'm happy to kind of walk you through that process that I have.
Yes, please.
Okay. Yeah. So, because again, this can be like, where do you even start with meal planning? And so I have this 3-step process that I follow, and I can send you a link with that, goes over that in more detail, written down if it's helpful. But the first, and I think the very key step, is to start with your schedule. So that's step 1, is to look at your own calendar and write down your events for the week. As a side note, I always recommend to plan on a weekly basis. I see a lot of things encouraging you to plan on a monthly basis, which honestly I think is a little bit too much, because our schedules change so quickly that it's not going to be accurate very soon. But if you can limit to going to the grocery store to only once a week, then that's where you can really save a lot of money, because you're not kind of like randomly buying things. So that's why that week is ideal. So, find some time, make it fun, like go to a coffee shop or like sit down, find some quiet time and write down what you're doing for the week. And then when you know where you're going to be and what you're going to do, step 2 then is to plan what and when you're going to cook. And this again goes back to, you don't have to cook every single night. You don't have to cook. Maybe even for you, cooking once a week is just fine. And you can make a pot of chili on Sunday night, and that's like your meals for the week, if you're not sick of it by Friday. But again, even planning half the times and limiting how you're going out to eat to just half is what you are now, that's going to be a step in the right direction. So step 1 is figure out what you're doing. Step 2 is to plan actually what and when you're going to do those things. And then step 3 is to make your grocery list and to go to the grocery store, which seems like an afterthought a lot of times, but oh man, it will save you so much time. So like take your recipes, figure out what it is, and make sure that, you're using all the ingredients that you have already so that you're not wasting a lot of food, and then only get what you need.
Right.
That is, there's of course other tips, like don't go to the grocery store when you're hungry, because
don't.
Man, it's expensive to do that. I'm sure we've all been there, and you get home and you're like, what? Why did I think I needed this? But and so I do have a template for anybody who wants to try this out. It walks you through those steps, and it gives you a space to actually write down your calendar, write down what you're eating. And as sort of a side note to the, what you're eating, I have you plan out just 1 meal a day on the calendar, but then I have you just think of some general ideas for your breakfast, for your lunch, and for your snacks. And that's where it's going to save you a lot of time and save you from, prepping multiple meals a day. It is perfectly fine to have your yogurt and granola for breakfast. Like if that's your go-to, then like stay with that. You don't need to make a frittata every morning in order to have a successful meal plan. So, Yeah. Now, I realize also that that 3-step process might feel pretty overwhelming if this is like your first time going in, and maybe even if you're a single person thinking like, yeah, this isn't really relevant to me. And so if that is an overwhelming feeling, where I would encourage you to start is with just picking one meal per week. So whether that's, I always encourage you to, do that on the day when you have the most energy and have the most time. So of course, time wise, like think about your class schedule and homework and all those things, but also the energy level, I think is pretty important. Oftentimes this is another sort of pitfall that I see people get hung up on, is that like they planned lasagna on Friday night. And by the time Friday night gets around, they're like, I am exhausted. I just want to like go out. Like I'm not doing that. So keep that in mind. And it's going to take some trial and error to find your perfect time. But if you start with just cooking one meal per week, and you do that for the next 4 years of your, college experience, that's 52 new meals every year times 4 years. And all of a sudden you have this huge repertoire of recipes that you feel comfortable and confident cooking. Even if you're repeating some, you're still going to have, a huge repertoire just to get started. And that I think is a really big deal.
Absolutely.
I will say, oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, it's okay.
Well, I was also going to say, I know that not everybody is like actually living in an apartment by themselves. And so if you are in the dorms or you're in another situation in which some of your meals are provided for you, the other way you could apply this or to start thinking about it is pick one of those meals or snacks that are not typically provided in the cafeteria that you don't go to. So if you're not really a breakfast person and you don't like to get up and go into the cafeteria, then maybe establishing some good breakfast habits would be a good place to start for you. And whether that's getting some variety so that, maybe right now you're fine with a granola bar every single day, but are you going to be fine with a granola bar every single day for the rest of your life? Or maybe you should like start learning some variety now before it's like a crisis and you're like, ugh, I'm just going to skip breakfast because I hate granola bars now. So that's where I would encourage either snack, breakfast, or maybe it's even lunch if you're going to be away off campus or something and need some practice packing a lunch.
Absolutely. I think that all of these tips and I'm really excited to see the resources that you provide as well are going to be extremely helpful. I know that when I am actually planning healthier meals, because I do planning all the time. I plan out before I go to the grocery store what we're going to have to a degree, right? I don't plan out every single day, but like you said, you're planning some way or one way or the other. But when I'm planning out my healthier meals, if I'm trying to, follow a particular diet or things like that, I'll cook in bulk, even if it's 4 pieces of chicken breasts. Yeah. I can have 4 pieces of chicken breasts. I can cook those 4 and have them in 4 different ways, right. Because you can change out the seasonings in the same pan, and you'll have, a variety of ways that you can change that up. You can add it into a salad. You can add some sauces to it, so there's all kinds of really fun ways to be creative with meal planning. It doesn't have to be one way or the other, but finding something that's comfortable for you and that works for you is going to be vital.
Yes, I love that. Yeah. And I mean, what better time to like experiment with that than right now when the stakes are low, because that's the best time to play around with this, when you don't have this like obligation to feed a bunch of other people. And so being able to like come up with that variety on the fly, like what a great skill what a great muscle to flex.
And it's empowering. I remember when I started cooking for myself and I started picking up some of the recipes that my grandmother had, had made when I was growing up, and I'd call her on the phone and she'd walk me through it as best as I could. I burned some chicken and I burned some pork chops, but today I love it, but it was trial and error. But when I started doing it on my own, it was very empowering.
Yeah. And I mean, I love that point too. Like, understanding that it's not going to be perfect the first time you come into this, and just, giving yourself some grace. And I wasn't either. My son is crawling around. I don't know if you can hear him. He's with grandma and grandpa outside. But Yeah, like it's not all going to be perfect. And like using your resources, like calling people that, or finding a friend who does like to cook, or those sorts of things can be so helpful. But yeah, just being willing to try it and see how it goes, even if it's not quote unquote perfect or doesn't look like the magazine or whatever. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Trial and error. So I think this is wonderful. We are going to go ahead and transition over to our second part of the interview, which will, provide our young adults with some awesome career advice on if they want to take the dietitian route in their career, or just want to learn more about how to eat healthier and so we'll transition into that here shortly. But before we go, do you have any other final thoughts that you would like to share?
No, I think we covered a lot of it, just a lot of what we're talking about is like, just have fun and enjoy this. Like food is meant for so much. It's meant for nourishment, of course, but it's also meant for pleasure and enjoyment and community. And so, my method of meal planning, the reason why I do it is not to put you in a box. It's actually to free you to both, honor your body and your cravings and what you love, and also to, really enjoy food in its fullest state. My motto that I have on my website is "Life's too short for bad food," and that's what I hope to embody, and that's really the reason behind what I do.
Awesome. Well, Anne, it's been a pleasure. I really, truly appreciate it. For those of you watching, stay tuned. There will be a second episode where Anne shares her journey of becoming a dietitian and some advice if you should want to become a dietitian in the future. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm. So I'm just going to jump in really quick.
Great.
And then I'll give a closeout that I can use on both videos.
Perfect.
Yeah. All right. So I know this is going to sound a little bit redundant, but because it's two segments, I'm going to start out with the whole industry and your role. I think I'm going to roll that into one question instead of 1 and 2.
Yeah.
So I'll just do that.
Definitely.
Awesome. Well, Anne, again, thank you so much for the advice that you've given us in meal planning for the college student or young adult. I truly appreciate it. In this part of the interview, I'd like to dig into a little bit more about your role and how you came to be a dietitian and to do all of the things that you do for the community today and for your clients. Can you tell us a little bit about the industry that you're in and the role that you play?
Yes, I love sharing my story. So thank you for asking me.
Yes.
So currently I am in private practice as a dietitian. So I started my journey a long time ago. I think I mentioned earlier, in our previous interview about how I grew up on a farm, and food was it was a very important part of our culture, of our family. And so in high school, for my senior project, we had to pick something to do. I learned about dietitian as a career, and I got very excited about it. And I picked writing a cookbook as my senior project. And from that moment, I never looked back. I'm one of the weird ones that actually went into college to become a dietitian, and I graduated with a dietetics degree. So I know that's not usual, but I just love food so much. And that's where my passion started. So during my college career, I studied abroad in Spain with a desire to learn Spanish. And so I am bilingual. And after graduating, to become a dietitian, a registered dietitian requires a bachelor's degree. It's about to actually require a master's degree, but currently it's a master's degree, and then an internship through an accredited organization, and to pass a registration exam. So I went through all of that. And as part of my internship, I also had the opportunity, I did my internship at the University of Kansas Medical Center. And because it was a university, I was also able to get my master's degree in conjunction with that. And so I did an extra year, and that's why you see the little letters after my name, MSRD. So because I had learned Spanish, as I was in graduate school, I was trying to figure out like what field I wanted to go into, because I said that I love food, but I didn't really have like, some people have like a specific disease state that they want to work with. Maybe they had, experience with diabetes or heart disease or celiac, something, in their past. I didn't really have anything specific that I knew that I wanted to work with, but because I had spoken, learned to speak Spanish, I did several different internships in the Spanish speaking community in Kansas City, and discovered and learned that diabetes actually disproportionately affects people of Hispanic descent and Spanish speaking. Part of the reason is poverty, but anyway, beyond that. But because I spoke Spanish, I felt that maybe I had this opportunity to work with this population. And so I started my professional journey in diabetes. That was my research.
Okay. May I ask if it was type 2 or type 1? Or both?
It ended up being both. So type 2 specifically is more prevalent in the Hispanic population. But working as I became a diabetes educator ultimately was my path. And I started in the diabetes center, the outpatient diabetes center at KU Medical Center. And I honestly loved working with that population. It's a hard disease state to work with because it's chronic. Once you have diabetes, it's something that is lifelong, and maybe it can sort of go into remission. But when I was working in an endocrinology clinic, by the time people ended up in the endocrinology clinic with diabetes, it had meant that their diabetes had progressed or they'd had it for many, many years. And so now we were seeing, multiple medications or insulin, and it was tough. And so it's not an easy place to work, but man, the people who work in endocrinology are a special breed because it's so difficult, I would argue. And also it offers this really beautiful opportunity for relationship with your patients, because you see them over and over, and you see them go through successes and you see them go through hard times, and you really get to walk with them on that journey. So that's where I started. And I started in Kansas City, and then I moved to Colorado and got another job with an endocrinology clinic out here, and had a lot of the same experiences. But as I started to work with more people, a common theme that I found come up, well, honestly, this theme I found was that food was really divided into silos. So I grew up on a farm, and, you grow food. So there's agriculture, and then you have to take the food and you have to cook it. So there was like this second silo of like learning how to cook food. And then there was this third silo of nutrition. Like, what do I actually need to eat to fuel my body in the best way? And I learned that these three silos hardly talk to each other. Well, like most people don't know where their food comes from. They didn't really understand what a farm looked like. Nobody knew what seasonal produce was. And then, in terms of cooking, like many people didn't have the basic skills. They just hadn't learned them. They hadn't practiced. They didn't feel comfortable in the kitchen. And then a lot of people were like, I don't like healthy food. I don't like the way it tastes. And I'm like, well, that's because you haven't learned how to cook it yet. And because you're not eating it fresh and wholesome. And so, I started a blog, Peas and Happiness, when I was still working as a diabetes educator, with sort of the goal, that very lofty goal, to integrate these three silos, to see where I could be in this process of, teaching people about each of these. So fast forward to when I decided to actually leave the clinic and go into this full time. Really, my impetus was, I sort of finally reached the point. I felt that I was pretty confident in my skills and where I was, and I was looking for some new challenges. And one of the key pieces that I saw missing was a very consistent resource to help people get a healthy dinner on the table, to really, like, that's where the practical skills of combining all these three things are. And so I launched the Peas and Hoppy Meal Guide membership, which is a weekly meal planning service that I send my members a menu of recipes with the actual recipes, with a grocery list, with all the practical things they need. And I take all the worry off of the nutritional aspect. I, design these so that they're nutritionally complete. I test them in my own kitchen so that I know they taste good and they are easy to make, even for my husband, who sets the timer when he's sauteing onions. So, I design them for the person who's not comfortable cooking. And I also use seasonal produce to do that. So that's the way that I have come really full circle from my origins on the farm to, meeting people in the city who didn't have a lot of experience, to really trying to unify these things and to give people the practical tools to eat good food.
That's awesome. I'm a foodie, so I'm all for that.
It's so fun. You just want everybody to love it.
I limited myself to salt, pepper, and garlic for the longest time. There's so many other seasons out there that are just amazing and tasteful and mouth-watering, and being able to, tap into that and to learn how to utilize all the produce that's out there and that's available. I eat today the vegetables that I hated when I was younger.
Right.
Because I eat them differently. Yes, right. Our tastes change over time. And I loved my grandparents' cooking. Don't get me wrong, but there's new ways of doing of cooking these same dishes, and it's a great way to explore what you like, and what you dislike.
Yeah, I totally agree. And, like you said, there's a whole world of seasonings. And like, if you're new to this, or especially if you've been diagnosed with a disease like diabetes, it's like, oh my gosh, like, where do I even start? And so that's really what I wanted to do with this membership, is to just take out a lot of the guesswork and say, like, here, like, you don't have to search the rest, like the internet. You don't have to spend hours, figuring this out, or like wondering if your recipe is going to be good. Here's an example. Let me take that off your plate.
Very good. I love it. I love it. I do. I really like it. And it hits home with me in many ways. My ex-husband was type 1 diabetic, and we lost him a few years ago to diabetes. And so, no, thank you. I appreciate that. So this is when we talk about diabetes, it hits home with me, and it's a very personal and dear to my heart. So I think it's very important for those of you watching or listening that if you or a loved one has diabetes, type 1 or type 2, it's very important your meal plan and your intake of your meals and the attention to your medical visits is vital. It's vital for your life. You might not recognize it now, but it's vital to all of your organs. And but if you do it right, you'll be fine. It's just I don't mean to scare anyone, but I just want to take a pause and just recognize that that you can live a healthy life despite it. And
you definitely can. It's scary to be so empowered, but you're exactly right that like actually you do have the power to change this. And
absolutely. Yes. So before we say our goodbyes, do you have any other advice that you would like to pass on to the audience that, the young adult that might be thinking about going into the dietitian field?
Yeah, absolutely. I think my advice is to follow your passion. And maybe that's, I don't know, maybe that's overused. But one thing that I struggled with as I was, going down my journey is that I never really had like a clear goal or endpoint. Like once I became a dietitian, I was like, well, that's all I've been working for. Like now, what do I do with that? Like, where should I go from here? And what I did was I looked around me and found the thing that, lit up my passion and that I was like excited to pursue and, was going to work really hard at. And I did that next thing. And so I said yes to the opportunities, and, it has ultimately led me to owning my own business, which I never thought that I was going to do. That was not, I thought maybe I would go into research or I'd get, another advanced degree and go, do something different. But here I am owning my own business, being able to, be in charge of my schedule and stay home with my son and be flexible and, to do interviews on a Saturday, like all of the things that I just always wanted to do, I'm able to do them. So it has not been without hard work. So I do want to, put that caveat on there that follow your passion doesn't mean like, I'm going to just like, it means like you have to pursue it and you have to put in the time and the work. But when you're doing what you love, it doesn't feel like work. So
no, it doesn't.
Yeah, I hope that that is inspiring, and I hope to see other dietitians out there in the future. We need more of us.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think this has been great. And I am really looking forward to the resources that you can provide and continuing to hear more from you within the community. And if you have any questions for Anne, you can reach her at.
You can find me on my website, www.peasandhappiness.com. That's happiness with an O, like hops, like the beer. So
Awesome.
Peas and Happiness. If you go to peasandhappiness.com/hello, you'll find a ton of free meal planning resources. So if it's something that you want to get into, go peruse that. There's recipes. There's the meal planning template that I reviewed. And you can also find me on Facebook and Instagram at the same handle at peasandhappiness.com or Peas and Happiness.
Awesome. I'm going to make sure that all of these links are published with this video, with both videos, episode 1 and 2. So, but if you happen to, you can't find it for whatever reason, you can always reach out to me at Kathy@mygirlfight.com. Be happy to help you in any way that I can. And it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much. I truly appreciate you taking the time out on a Saturday to join us and to give us your time freely.
Oh, it has been my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. And with that, I will say my goodbyes. Have a great day wherever you are. Thanks.